dining hall, 300 hungry children. In the kitchen, absolutely nothing. George Müller prays, "Father, thank you for the food that is about to come." Strange, isn't it? Let's follow the story and discover what happens next. The life of George Müller.
George Müller was born in Prussia in 1805. His father was a wealthy tax collector, essentially a high-ranking government official of the time. By the age of 10, George was already stealing large sums of public money. At 14, on the very night his mother was dying, George was drunk in a tavern, gambling and playing cards until 2 in the morning. The next day, as her coffin was carried out of the house, he wandered through the city with his friends. His heart was so hardened that he didn't shed a single tear. By 16, George had become what he later called a respectable criminal. Dressed in fine clothes and hiding behind his father's reputation, he pretended to be a young nobleman. He stayed in luxury hotels, lived lavishly, and deceived everyone. Eventually, he was caught and sent to prison. Once again, his father paid a large sum to buy his freedom.
At 18, George decided to study theology, not out of faith, but out of ambition. He believed that becoming a priest could guarantee him status and income. During the day, he studied Hebrew. At night, he pawned his books to buy alcohol. "I went to church only for appearances. I never prayed," he later admitted in his journals. Everything changed on November 12, 1825, in the home of a Christian named Wagner. That evening, George witnessed something that shook him deeply. A young man was kneeling on the floor, speaking to God as if God were physically present in the room. In that moment, George understood the difference. He knew about God from books, but this man knew God personally. That night, George realized that Jesus was not a theory, but a living person. For the first time, he truly understood that Christ had died for sinners, including him. He repented, believed, and his life was completely transformed. He went on to serve in a small parish, but everything shifted again 7 years later when he arrived in Bristol. The city was collapsing. Cholera was spreading rapidly, and the streets were filled with thousands of abandoned children. Their future was grim: starvation or the workhouses, brutal institutions where children were treated worse than criminals. George Müller saw the fear in their faces. He saw the poverty. He saw the hopelessness, and something inside him broke. One verse from the Bible caught his attention. God is the father of the fatherless. And George thought, if God really is their father, then he is responsible for providing for them. I'm only the administrator, the one who sets the table. That was the moment he decided to open homes for orphans. The problem? He had no money, and he refused to ask anyone for it. What he did next sounded like madness. George rented his first house on Wilson Street with the very first donation that arrived unexpectedly. Everything was ready, the doors were opened, and no one came. Müller was confused. "I prayed for the house, the money, and the furniture," he later wrote. "But I forgot to pray for the children." So he knelt down and asked God for orphans. The next morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, someone knocked on the door, then another, and then many more. Remember the rebellious child? The thief? This was the man God had reshaped. But the greatest test was still ahead. September 4th, 1844. A large dining hall, 300 hungry children. In the kitchen, nothing. George Müller wrote in his journal, "We had no money for food. At 7 in the morning, no one had arrived. I told the house mother, 'Seat the children at the tables.' She looked at me in disbelief and said, 'But Mr. Müller, there is nothing to put on the plates.' I replied, 'It is our duty to be ready for whatever the Lord will send.' Then he prayed, 'Father, we thank you for the food you are about to give us.' Moments later, there was a knock at the door. It was the town baker. 'Mr. Müller, I couldn't sleep,' he said. 'At 2 in the morning, I felt strongly that your children had no bread. I baked fresh loaves and brought them to you." Shortly after, a loud crash outside. The milkman's cart had broken down right in front of the orphanage. The axle had snapped. "I have 10 large cans of fresh milk," he said. "They'll spoil before I can repair the cart. Would you like them for the children?" God is never late, but he rarely arrives before the very last moment. While the government saw orphans as a burden, cheap labor for workhouses, Müller saw them as God did, as princes. He gave them more than food. He gave them dignity, good clothes, and quality education, proving that these children were not forgotten, but deeply loved by a king with limitless resources. 1870. After 40 years of marriage, Mary, George's wife, became seriously ill. She wasn't just his wife. She was his partner in prayer, the mother of the orphans, and the one person who fully understood his mission. George prayed for her healing. This time, the answer was no. He later wrote, "I prayed for her recovery, but I added, 'Father, not my will, but yours be done.' When she took her final breath, I knelt beside her bed and thanked God for taking her home and freeing her from suffering." Her funeral stunned the entire city. Instead of being crushed by grief, George Müller stood at the pulpit. With a trembling but steady voice, he read from Psalm 119, "You are good, and you do good." In front of thousands, he showed that a heart can be broken and still trust God completely. March 10th, 1898. At 92 years old, George Müller went to bed after an ordinary day. The next morning, his room was unusually quiet. He wasn't in his bed. He was found kneeling beside it. His heart had stopped while he was praying. He died exactly as he had lived, in total dependence on God. On the day of his funeral, the city of Bristol came to a halt. Shops and factories closed, the streets filled with thousands. Former orphans, now doctors, lawyers, missionaries, came to honor the man who had raised them. George Müller was not a flawless saint. He was a thief saved by grace, who dared to believe that God keeps his promises,